When he comes up, keep your hands on the wheel.
We've seen police violence against Black people depicted in films and TV shows for years now. Everything from Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, a film from the 1970s directed by Melvin Van Peebles. You have Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee's very important film of the 1980s, and even a sitcom like Family Matters dealt with the subject of police harassment.
Is that why you made him get out of his car? Is that why you forced him to lie down? Is that why you cuffed him?
I think the difference that we're seeing now is that because of the media attention and the fact that now we're able to actually oftentimes see shootings and killings in our social media feeds as they're happening. As a filmmaker, you have to consider that the viewer might be coming with that baggage, especially if your targeted audience is people of color. When a show or a movie does not take care of its audience or doesn't consider what the audience may feel, it becomes a huge problem, and it could border on exploitative or even sort of wallowing in the suffering that is happening on screen. An example of a work that does not carefully consider the audience's reactions to seeing these images on screen is Detroit. The focus on the suffering and the way in which the camera really zooms in on that, even though it's effective, can also just feel very uncomfortable and icky to experience. I think for those artists who are wrestling with this subject, especially those who are Black, it's important for them not to dwell on the suffering or the horrific moments. It's also very important to focus on the recovery, the aftermath, the emotional toll that comes long after the incident has happened. And I think one of the better examples of this has been Queen Sugar. In season 2 of Queen Sugar, one of the characters, Micah, who's in high school, gets pulled over while riding in a very expensive new birthday present from his parents.
Let me see your registration now.
It's not until later in the season when we learn what happened to Micah, and we don't have to see it to know how harrowing it is for him, and that's what makes it really powerful.
He takes out his gun, pushes me down, and he puts the gun in my mouth. And he pulled the trigger, Dad.
Another trend that's been very interesting to see among film and TV shows has been narratives that explore the idea of police violence, but not in a very explicit way. The interaction doesn't lead to any grand moment or any shocking moment. Instead, it's just a very awkward moment. And a couple of shows that have done that well have been Insecure and The Chi. With Insecure, there's a scene in season 2.
You in a rush? No, sir. You must be. Nothing the other way you turn.
Watching Lawrence's body language and the way in which he uncomfortably chats with a police officer is part of what makes it so visceral and feels so grounded and real. And in The Chi, there's a similar instance where Brandon is stopped by 2 police officers, one Black and one white.
What are you stopping me for? Get over the car.
The threat of police violence is something that probably even more people can relate to than the actual actions of them. So when you think of these projects that are selective with what they show, I think we're looking at works that are really interrogating and going deep into the way in which these experiences can affect us on both an emotional level and a psychological level.
When the officer tells you to stop, you stop. Yes, sir.
I'm not a slave to greed, I don't embrace your make-believe. I've never been for sale, no matter what they think I need. So let it be decreed, let this music serve the deed. Let it spread like a disease, let it spawn a noble seed. There's more than meets the eye, there's more than meets the price. If you can't see the sky, there's too much artificial light. I can't predict my path, but they can't fully see my past. I'm running from the flash, but heading straight inside the blast. A mountain full of ego built upon a heap of trash. It's exactly what you get when you can't fully do the math.
Background about yourself?
I guess I'll start with the juvenile death sentence of El Wap. 1991 is called the Super Predator narrative, in which they say that African American males, specifically and indigenous people, are incorrigible. And so under that narrative, I was given the death penalty as a juvenile, sentenced to die in prison. 28 years later, through a lot of hard work and organizations vouching for my humanity and freedom, we petitioned the governor, and I was released from prison about 40 days ago. And so that's pretty much the backdrop of how I'm here today.
Okay. So right now we're representing a little photo. What do you see in the picture? And can you signify which one stands more out for yourself?
You said, what do I see in the picture?
Yes. And what stands out to you that kind of communicates with you the most?
I'm kind of biased, to tell you the truth, because I actually know Dante Williams.
Okay.
And he's very dear to me. He's one of my young bros up out of Compton. My case happened in Compton, so he is one of the men that I've been mentoring. And I've mentored probably hundreds of men from Compton in the last 28 years I was incarcerated. But in this specific picture, what stands out to me the most is the crunch to humanity. Is the crunch to humanity. Is that, we are beings are made to stand erect, and we're made for movement. If you look at the picture, that this depiction is that like he's spineless, that he doesn't have any form of erection or statue, and that the weight of, I get the red, white, and blue, and the weight of the chains and shackles, if you look at the sign of the balance of the judicial system, has broken him. Then you see the tears in his eyes, but yet still he has them waves in his head and the beautiful little brown skin. With those tears in his eyes, it look like his spirit is broken, and the brokenness of the spirit naturally is signified within the stature, with his just crunched down, restricted, and lacks motivation. So that's on my first look, being that I haven't looked at it previously in years. But yeah, that's what I see.
Okay. And as well as from everyone that you kind of met over the years, what kind of stand out to you once you were released? Like, what was kind of hard to kind of grasp?
What is hard to kind of grasp? The dependency on technology, particularly cell phones. It seems, as even myself, everything travels through these devices, and there is not a lot of personal connection, because normally, just,
Yeah.
you feel me?
Yeah.
People are driving, hiding from the police, so people find it amazing that I give eye contact, that I'm very personable, believe in human contact. So just the dependency on cellular devices, that's what's really almost depressing.
Okay. And as for the justice system, what do you think that we need to work more on? Or at least change over time?
Well, the justice system is only a representation of our political system. And, they are the arm of the law. And the penal system is only doing what the judicial system is claiming that they need done. So we have to go back to our politicians and what are really their views of African American people, brown people, indigenous or poor folk space, gentrification, forced migration, immigration, and all these things. So if you ask me, what can we change? We have to change our politicians to be true and put men and women inside of those offices if we're not going to just change the whole system. If we're that bold to think that way of changing the whole system, that's what I'm with. But if we're not going to do that, we have to strategically, especially your generation, put people in office who's going to represent our causes and be serious about our people and our space and our lives.